The Midnight Selkie, Chapter 9. It was an antsy sort of night. It had been days since Raleigh had been able to see the dolphins. Things had been too tense at home. The White Whale Tavern was also quite busy. It was uncertain now just how long his mother would bring him to work. She would be getting her boating license any day now. She'd be training to take over one of Captain Jim's boats then. Truth be told, Kiana was eager to pilot the beautiful Countess Aquamarine, but she would likely start on the childhood favorite, the Aquaquami. Raleigh seemed lost in thought. He was. The dolphins had become his friends, but today there were other individuals on his mind. He had been waiting for some time, which confused the impatient dolphins. Ebby was getting antsy too. Raleigh's silence and stillness made them rather uncomfortable. He got up and peered out into the hallway. Not a soul was to be seen. Perfect. It was just what he was hoping for. It was just like the last time, minus the song, of course. Quietly, he escaped room D with Ebby chasing after him. He made his way down the halls and to the mystery room. He cast a quick glance to the dog before sliding his key card. The door hissed open, and in they went. Raleigh was very quiet and careful. If one of the biologists were down there, he could get in some real trouble. It was so silent down there in general. Idle machines and running water were the only sounds to greet him as he ventured down. And there, in the tank enclosure, were the 6 individuals. Once Raleigh came around the corner, the individuals sprung to life, save Nemo, and darted to the back. Once again he felt the gazes and glares. "Hi," he said gently to the white-haired boy. Nemo stood up and put himself before Raleigh, the glass between them. He gave him a sweet smile and a gentle nod in greeting. This pleased Raleigh. At least he wasn't being ignored or attacked. "My name is Raleigh. You're Nemo, right?" Nemo replied with another nod. His expression remained soft and kind. The others remained wary, and they watched him carefully. Raleigh felt very out of place before them. He stepped back, awkwardly putting himself in an odd stance. Nemo cocked his head to one side curiously. What was this boy up to? After thinking about it and feeling foolish just standing there with his hands over his head, Raleigh began to attempt the strange dance that Admiral Knight Porter had tried to teach him. Somehow his awkward movements perked the interest of some of the others. The elder and the blue-violet-eyed ones held back, but the others moved forward a little to examine the dance. Next, all eyes seemed to fall on Nemo. The little one lifted his arms and began a beautiful, graceful version of the dance that Raleigh was attempting. Ebby, starting to feel the need to make herself known, hopped up onto her hind legs and began to do a dance of her own. However, she was rather top-heavy and only managed to tumble over on her side. She wasn't as graceful on land as she was in the water. "I knew it," Raleigh gasped. "You are Selkies, aren't you?" The 4 Selkies were more curious about this person now. But it was Nemo who ultimately was the first to speak. "Why are you here, Brother Raleigh?" Oh, how beautiful. It was as if that sweet voice was laced with the most precious of silver. "Nemo!" the elder scolded. "He is not one of us." "Perhaps he is like us," Nemo replied. "He knows our dance. No human has ever learned to dance like a Selkie." "Absurd! Humans are just getting smarter." "If he knows the dance, then until we know if he is dangerous, I see him as our brother." "So it's true. You are Selkies," Raleigh said breathily. The fox-eyed one gave a gentle nod. "We are Selkies. Why have you come here, young one?" "My dad brings me here. I swim with the dolphins." "There are dolphins here?" "Yeah. They're helping me learn how to swim." The eyes drifted along among themselves, silently contemplating this boy. That was such a peculiar thing for him to say. Didn't all humans living by the water know how to swim? The fox-eyed one asked rather simply to that. You can't swim? Well, I'm kinda afraid of the water. I've been trying to learn to get over it. We understand, Brother Raleigh, Nemo soothed. We are afraid of the water, too. I know it sounds rather silly, but selkies can't swim without their sealskins. We don't know how. Who are all of you? May I have your names? The fox-eyed one stood tall, placed a slender hand on his chest. I am Yue. He placed a hand on another's head. It was the one who resembled him, and it confirmed Raleigh's suspicions. This is my son, Artemis. I can certainly see the resemblance, Raleigh chuckled. It only made Yue and Artemis both beam proudly. Yue then continued, placing his hand then on the shoulder of the dark-haired one. He is called Phoebus, and of course, you have already met Nemo. Who are the ones in the back? Do they not like people? They are a little leery of those they do not know. The younger of the two is Lazuli. The other is Otari. It's a little out of order, Nemo laughed. Otari is the oldest of us. Then Yue is. Then Phoebus is. Out of us younger Selkies, Lazuli is the next in line as the oldest, then Artemis, then me. Raleigh went over them quietly. He wanted to make sure he had a proper name for the proper Selkie. It would be embarrassing to try and speak to them and use the wrong name. Some people could get rather offended over that. After being sure he had them all set into his memory, or thought he did, he scratched his head. Why are you all here? What happened for you to end up in this sort of place? Who cares how we got in? Phoebus remarked. His voice was rather powerful, making Raleigh step back in surprise. For such a slender man, he sure had a set of vocal cords. Can you get us out? Humans can't be trusted, Lazuli insisted. If he does anything, it'll just be taking us from one trap into another. Do you have a better idea, Lazuli? Artemis accused. Anything would be better than wasting away here. Unless we are going to a fate worse than this one, Otari chimed in. We won't know until then, will we? Yue replied plainly. But I don't see much difference between that and this. So it would make more sense to put some hope and faith into Brother Raleigh. A chance of freedom out there is better than no hope of it in here. Ebby began to bark, racing up and down the glass. How dare they ignore her for this long? She stopped and lowered her top half in front of Nemo, barking at him. She couldn't speak the way they could, but she hated being overlooked. Nemo seemed confused at first, but barked back. This only made her continue to bark at him. In turn, he barked back at her with a higher pitch. He made the others laugh. It didn't sound like a very convincing dog bark. It didn't even sound like a seal bark. But what it did sound like was a way to lighten the tension and bring smiles on the faces of the majority of them. Nemo raised his gaze from the dog and smiled once again at Raleigh. I am happy to see you again, you know. Me too, Raleigh replied. I've been so curious about you guys. It's been 7 years. You've gotten rather big since then. That statement brought a sense of confusion to him. I'm afraid I don't understand. I only met you several days ago. I've never seen a Selkie until then. I don't know you. Nemo gave a gentle chuckle. It was so sweet to see him smile. It was as if he were born to always wear it. I remember you. Maybe one day you'll recognize me, too. That would make me very happy. Maybe, Raleigh replied. But I think I ought to be getting back. If I'm not with the dolphins when Dad comes to get me, he could get real mad. You're leaving us? Artemis asked. Figures, Lazuli muttered. I'll try to come back, I promise, Raleigh said. But I just have to go now. We will be waiting. Brother Raleigh, Yue said softly with a farewell nod as Raleigh and Ebby darted back around the corner and out of the room. It was later than he thought. He rushed up the halls and hoped to get back in time before anyone would know that he had been missing all this time. He gasped and came to a halt abruptly. Abby certainly wasn't expecting that, and she crashed right into him, unable to stop in time. In front of room D was Ben, and he was talking to Malcolm. The crash had alerted them to their presence. Boy, Malcolm didn't look happy at all. "Raleigh," he growled, "where have you been?" I... You're not even wet. Why are you wasting my time? No, Dad, If you're not going to use your time properly, then you shouldn't get it at all. Don't embarrass me by lying. But, Dad, if you would just listen to me a minute. Not another word. I won't stand for you making a fool out of me in my own lab. Now let's go home. You've done enough for one night. Raleigh huffed out a sigh, having no choice but to obey. Or perhaps it was that he didn't have the energy to do otherwise. Abby let out a whine as she crawled beside Ben, who seemed rather shocked by this exchange. "What is wrong with you?" Kiana spat as she slammed down her sponge on the kitchen table. "Can't you go just one day without being an insensitive bully?" "He lied to me," Malcolm insisted. "He didn't give him a chance to lie to you, or tell you what happened. You were too busy yelling at him. How do you ever plan to earn his trust?" "If anyone needs to earn his trust, it's you and your father," Malcolm spat back. "I wasn't the one who almost let him drown. He owes me his trust. I'm his father. He needs to respect my rules and me." "Trust and respect are earned, Malcolm. It doesn't matter who you are," Kiana hissed. "You can also be lost." "What is that supposed to mean?" he demanded. "You're going to punish him by stunting his treatment then. Then you're going to insult him because he's not getting any better. Keep it up, Malcolm, and it won't be a fear of water that he'll need a therapist for." Their argument did not go unheard. Raleigh had been listening from the top of the staircase. Their voices had carried out of the kitchen, through the den and up those stairs, and to his ears. Yes, he had been listening. But he was beginning to wish that he hadn't. He covered his ears and closed his eyes tight, wishing he could just disappear. He couldn't take it anymore. He had more sense, however, than to try and get out through the front door. So he did what many kids did, climbed out of the window. For someone who had no talent for climbing trees, it was amazing how he thought he'd be able to scale down a gutter pipe. He slipped when he was about halfway down and landed flat on his back on the grass. Luckily, the most damage sustained was nothing more than having the wind knocked out of his body. It took a few minutes for him to recover, and then he was up and running. In itself, it was a risky sort of task. It was after dark, and he was alone. There was no dog to look out for him. Despite that, however, the swift walk was peaceful, albeit long. Eventually, he made it to his desired destination, Porter's Lighthouse. Raleigh fumbled through the dunes and the sand and the high grass, trying to make it to the building. He could see that there were no lights ablaze inside. The only light that was dependably illuminated was that at the top of the lighthouse, being as it was integral to nighttime navigation. He almost thought about turning back. It was rather late after all. But home would be where all the anger was, and it would be waiting for him, if not growing, when he returned. No, he couldn't. He wasn't ready to go home yet. Standing out here all night wouldn't be the brightest of ideas either, so he made his way forward, closing distance between him and the lighthouse. Once he stood at the Admiral's door, he hesitated. But it was only for a moment. The next instant, it was as if something in him switched off. He didn't care what the Admiral thought, or anyone else for that matter, so he began to bang on the door. He banged on it as if he were a policeman on a raid. In moments, a light flickered. By the look of it, it was probably a small kerosene lamp. The door flew open, startling Raleigh, and made him fall back onto his bottom in the sand. It seemed he had a real habit of ending up in this position. "What in the Sam Hill is going on? Can't anyone let an old man sleep?" He peered down at the intruder. His squinty eye twitched, trying to focus on who it was. The corners of his mouth drooped when he realized who it was. "Boy, have you gone about mad?" Raleigh peered up at him. Alberni Porter, even now, seemed the stereotypical mariner and lighthouse keeper. He wore bed slippers on his feet. He wore long white cotton pajamas with red stripes. On his head was a nightcap to match. Despite this comical appearance, Raleigh did not laugh. Instead, tears welled up and he began to cry. Nye's stern face softened a little at such a pathetic sight. "Oh, no. Don't do that, boy." He offered his hand down to him to help him back to his feet. "Come on. Come inside and calm down." Up Raleigh got and threw himself at the Admiral. He grabbed onto his pajamas and let out hard sobs. This surprised Nye, who placed his hands on the boy's shoulders. "It's all right, Raleigh. You come inside and you tell old Nye all about it." Admiral Nye Porter set down a mug of hot cocoa on the kitchen table. Raleigh was curled up in the seat and was hiding his face behind his knees. He wiped his eyes, which were now puffy and red. "Rather late for boys to be a-wandering the streets alone. Something's heavy on your mind. Does anyone know you're here?" Raleigh shook his head in reply. Not good." "Please don't call them, Admiral. I don't want to go home for a while." "What about your grandpappy?" Nye asked. "I don't know. Nobody understands. I can't tell him anything. You're the only one who actually listens to what I have to say. You're not ashamed of me. You're not disappointed in me. You're a lot like the dolphins." Admiral Nye Porter paused a moment. He had been pouring himself some strong coffee when Raleigh said these words. "I'm pleased, boy. To be compared to dolphins. That's rather nice." "My parents have been fighting a lot lately. I think it's mostly related to me. My mom always tries to defend me no matter what. She's always been like super mom." "That's good," Nye said with a bit of sadness. "But I don't think my dad likes me very much at all." Raleigh hid his face further behind his knees. "I think he wishes that he never had a son. Maybe he just wishes that he had a son that wasn't me. If I were someone else's son, at least, then he could walk away and stop hurting us with the horrible things he says." "Parents can be a real pain sometimes, Raleigh," Nye replied. "People only get one life, you know. Lifetimes are short. We only have so much time to master what we can. Some are just better at it than others. Some are just better in different areas. Doesn't do much for compatibility, does it?" "No. Dad won't let me go to the lab anymore. No more swimming. No more dolphins." Rawl nibbled on his bottom lip. "No more Selkies either. I don't know what I would have done anyway. But I don't like it that they have to stay locked up down there." The Admiral frowned as he swirled his coffee about in his tall mug. "Selkies do not belong in captivity like that. Not like that." Raleigh put his legs down and leaned forward. He propped himself against the table with his elbows. "They wanted me to help them. But how can I help them when I have my own problems that I can't fix?" "What would you do, boy?" I asked. "How would you have gone about playing hero?" "I don't know," Raleigh sighed with a whine. He ran his fingers through his hair as he lowered his head. "My head feels like it's going to pop. It hurts." Admiral Porter got back to his feet and circled the table so as to place a hand on Raleigh's shoulder. "Go and get some rest, boy. Sleep on it. There's nothing to be done about any of it tonight." "I hate that I came all this way and bothered you for nothing, Admiral," Raleigh said sadly. "I'm sorry." "You're no bother, boy," he replied. "Sometimes things happen. I don't mind being a pair of ears if you're needing someone to listen." "I get a lot of people insisting that it'll always be all right. I always have people who are mean, rude, and just obnoxious. I need someone in between. I want someone who listens to me and can give me honest answers without making me feel bad about myself." "For that, you came to the right place," Nye smiled. Raleigh got up and threw himself to hug the Admiral again. It caused the old man to chuckle thoughtfully and stroke the boy's hair. "Thank you, Admiral,"